Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you tonight. Just so I get a sense of who's here. Who's here? I know there's some engineers. Got them in the back. So when the organizers said to me, will you come and speak, and this is my second time at this forum, I think it was the second year that I keynoted. So I'm happy to be back. So in terms of trying to prepare to be bright and intelligent for all of you, I do what I usually do. I opened my computer, I went to Google, and I said, why can't we end poverty? And I got all these points of why we can't, and then I went to some other site, and it told me, people getting poorer. I went to another site, it told me children are getting on health care. To another site where people are getting poorer, but I couldn't find anything that was fresh, exciting, new, whether it was a policy or a piece of legislation or something that said, we are really standing on this cliff that we've been falling off of for at least the 500 years that folks have been around in this country, and long before that, that nobody has really come up with what do we have to do to change this around. And if you know of someone, I'd love to have pizza with them and sit down and talk. I got here with about $80, pretty pregnant, but pretty freaked out. I had just spent 2 years in South Vietnam, and think, this is 1970-71. So this was a very difficult time in South Vietnam during the war. The war was kind of, we all knew it was going to end, but the way it was happening was extremely difficult for the people of that country. I had seen children with napalm burns. I ran a house with 10 kids. And I saw community amongst those children. They took care of each other. The ones whose burns were less than the others took more responsibilities. The ones who were older took care of the kids in a different way. And I went, it's about community. Look at these 10 wounded, in extreme pain, anguish, children, and they are finding a way to live with each other and to lift each other up. Now, why can't we do that? It's been difficult in human history. I mean, we always hear stories about, some political event was going on, or Syria or somewhere that people are coming at, then we're taking care of them, and the UN is there, and Oxfam is there, and everyone's there. But just that moment, being with those kids who were in such deep trauma, they've had a spirit that will always be a shining light. They just had that. And I learned that and have tried very hard that when I'm in the trenches or being arrested to put in jail or whatever the heck I'm going to do, I remember that. So I wanted to pay them gratitude and just remember them today, because much of who I am today came from that work that I did for those young kids. I came to the United States. I had a master's in journalism. I found out very quickly that as a woman with an accent, I was going to get maybe a job on University Avenue at one of the 2 Indians-run stores. Fast forward, change the accent, go back to school, come out with a master's in divinity, and the entire economic picture changed for me. So education, as was already pointed out, it's a huge step towards moving out of poverty, but not the education that our kids are getting now in this country. I can't include you because you're sitting at this esteemed university, but not everybody has that opportunity. We're still not able to provide the kind of education to the next generation who will come up, and we would have created enough jobs, good paying jobs for them so that they can succeed. That gap is not going to close. That is not closing. If we just look at the gaps of that list that you sent me, none of those gaps have closed enough that where we can say there is a possibility that there is some potential that at some point, like right after the Depression, that gap of income inequity was not as huge. Now, not just in the United States, but all across the world, that gap is. How many people here are aware of Occupy and what happened, and how many countries it was in and all of that? We were just as thrilled as we were when the Black Panther Party started. It was like, yes, we have a moment here where people are going to take decision-making in their hands, and the numbers are going to influence the banks, the institutions that really are responsible for helping continue inequity. Now, you look at the stock market every day. Well, maybe you don't because maybe you don't have any stocks yet, and nor do I, but I hear about it. The stock market, ever since the economic crash, where more people have moved into poverty, where more people have moved into, we can't say into food stamps because we've cut them enough, that the stock market just continues to just go berserk. Now, I think what's happening is that people who have the resources are able to buy more resources. People who have money can accumulate more money. They can invest their money. They can go out, start manufacturing. We wish more of them would do that. Or they can go buy other not so well-doing businesses and companies and add to their portfolios. Now everybody's trying to eat everybody up, even up here. Because the fewer institutions we have, or people controlling all the money, more money will sit unused. That's my conviction, is that it will not be invested in the issues that we care about. Will not be invested in, say, improving our schools all the way from Louisville to, Alaska. What else is private money not going to do? Now, I'm not talking about Soros and the Clintons and those folks, but there are many, many, many others who would rather put their money right now into changing the political context and the way people are thinking politically in this country. And we can look at both the liberal and the, I don't like to say right wing, but people, the conservative, thank you. Where that money is being put, buying up radio stations, consolidating media around conservative issues, creating the largest political action committee. It's not, that money is not going into the community. And even the money that is supposed to go into the community, and I'm going to use the example of homelessness. In 1971, when I started to work in that field, right here at Telegraph in Bancroft, and Reagan had just let everybody out of the institutions without any care of community care, none of that. And actually, I think it was Reagan who said, we declared war on poverty and poverty won. I think that was Reagan. And then he went and did more to make more people poor and more people without health care, without hope, without homes. In 1971, Berkeley was a very, very, very different place. It sort of embraced the folks that came into town. Also, it was a little difficult to tell who came out of a mental institution if they were, fairly able to maneuver around the community, and the rest of the counterculture. No, I'm serious. I mean, folks on everything, and then folks who've got, some problems. For a few years, everybody sort of existed very well, peacefully. People in the hills would call us and say, oh, do you have 3 workers? Would you send them up? We would like to, give them work. I mean, the community was open to the idea of that if we put together community-based services, if we hired our folks, and at that time it was our folks, not the homeless, it was our folks. And if we support, having places for everyone that didn't have a home to go to, that maybe we could put a dent in the problem. What they didn't think was, and us advocates were crazy. We didn't know nothing. We just wanted to, do good. And we were saying, irregardless of where the folks have come from, Napa State Hospital, okay? They're just like us. You have to show them the same compassion, and really, they're just like us. I think Berkeley is the city where we have spent more time on talking about poverty, hunger, homelessness, and the response, both politically and from the community, has been very, very generous. But what has also come with that is, we will write you a check, we will we will support you, but can you take everybody that's on the streets off the streets? And I'm sure some of you feel that way some days when you're walking down Telegraph Avenue. It's like, oh my gosh, when will they find the solutions? Well, I'm asking you, when will you find the solutions? What are the solutions? Somebody give me 1 or 2? I mean, we know the problems. We have the statistics on the problems. What are the solutions? What solutions have come forward in the last, say, 5 years? So you don't have to think out of your crib. Sorry. All know it's education, it's living wage, it's gender equity, it is economic equity. What else?
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing, healthcare, and food that doesn't kill. That if we could somehow get our hands around that, and then looked at, okay, what does the United States spend its money on? And we're about to enter another war today. I think some of you see that. We're never out of war. The United States has never been out of war. If you look at its 500 years of history, we have spent a lot of resources on having the biggest army, having the best equipment, and being, places where maybe we belong, maybe we don't belong. That's not what I'm here to talk about. But the resources have been shifted for the last, as long as I've been here, more towards what kills and less towards what nourishes and grows and helps people thrive and families come together. And then when we're not like having war against people, then we're having war against drugs. Entire war on drugs hurt our people the most. Crack epidemic devastated the Oakland community. The laws that existed between, if you were found with white powder cocaine, you got a slap on your hand. If you had a smidgen of crack or something, 10 years, whatever, doesn't matter, 10, 12, 5. We actually took a third of our young people who would have been giving to the community and are now sitting in jail. 40% of the people in our jails and prisons are people with severe mental illness and extremely bad health. So, sure, we can talk about, we have problems of gender equity, and we have problems with this, we have problems with this. But we have to look at it in the construct of the system. does this system always, will capitalism always need some people to be at the bottom so other people can be at the top? Maybe, maybe not, but I think so. I think the way it's all structured is structured to really benefit a certain group of people. And who were those people when the Constitution was written? Check it out. No, really, sometimes we just have to, you know. When I'm in India and I read my Constitution, I go, yeah, right, gender equity. It was really written to protect a certain class of people. And it had to do with people who had land. And poor people, and at that time, you know, time of slavery, whatever land people had that they might be farming was taken away, as was the land of the native peoples of this country. We really have to challenge. One of the questions was, how can we become involved? What I've always loved about interns from any school out of San Francisco or the East Bay, the interns that come in to challenge us and not the interns that come in to listen. So my advice to you folks as you move into the community and start finding internships and stuff, don't walk in as though you are not bringing a great deal to the table. Because you are. You're bringing your entire experience up to now. Bringing the experience of the professors who taught you, your parents, your schools. Come to our tables in nonprofits to challenge us and ask those very, very difficult questions. Be able to say, so Boona, you've been doing this for 43 years, and there are just as many homeless people on the streets now than when you started. So you must be a poverty fan, because you haven't made any difference. And why people sometimes have started to think that way is because what we started as a response to an issue. We became an industry. The homeless industry, the poverty industry, there are more people employed in those industries to get services to the people than there are people who are needing the services. So when it gets to that point, and the power of the discussion leaves the grassroots and moves, you know, to national institutes on homelessness and something. Where is it? In Washington, D.C. Another one after another. The movement that you know, we've been part of and we continue to be part of, the grassroots, has weakened because the grassroots folks usually listen to the folks that they're trying to serve. And Janie and I, I'm going to talk about our partnership. We talk with folks. We listen. When the decisions are made, very rarely is the voice of the people in the streets heard. But a lot of what comes down from the federal government is based on what they're hearing from the experts. And sometimes the two views are not the same. So my big push has been, wherever possible, whenever possible, get the people who are in the experience to be at the tables where decisions are being made. And I've fought very, very, very hard to do that and have had some success in accomplishing that. So I don't like a minimum wage at all. I mean, what is that? Minimum wage might be fine where you can buy a house for $40,000, but minimum wage here is poverty. If you have 3 kids or 4 kids, minimum wage in the Bay Area, you're still living under poverty. Shelters are not a solution. Food banks are not a solution. They're Band-Aids. Affordable housing is a solution. To be able to grow your own food in the back of your house that you might have just bought because somehow you got to be a bus driver. That's a solution. There are many people who do move out of homelessness, but not very far out of poverty. And I think that's important to remember, because a lot of the affordable housing people will say, well, now we have all these people living in our affordable housing units, they have to pay only 30% of their rent and they can keep 70% of their income. And the 70% of the income is $192. Like, you know, we're just moving things around. We really do not have, what did President Obama say the other day? He said something like, my biggest challenge, the biggest challenge of my presidency has been how big the gap has gotten. And I wanted to say, so, you know, could you like give us a little more than that? This is a good city in terms of its loyalty. Berkeley gives a lot. People who live in Berkeley give a lot of money. But what we have to remember is the order in which they give. It's usually it's usually universities, theaters, parks, and then you keep going down, and 98 is homelessness on a list of 100. So homelessness is a high priority in people's minds. Some of it comes from years of saying, what have we done? Without realizing that right after Reagan's folks came, then the Vietnam War ended, and 30% of homeless folks are Vietnam-era veterans. Now, did the Veterans Administration take care of them when they came? No. So if we had, let's just pretend that between Reagan opening the doors of Napa and all the folks here, and before we've even had time to put services in place, the war ends, and we're getting veterans who are not well. Very few people from Vietnam came back well. So we're then like, okay, let's respond to the veterans. The 80s, the crack epidemic hits. Makes thousands of people poor and homeless. And we're like, okay, now let's... So it's been sort of, you know, it's not, we haven't looked at things holistically. We've looked at it through funnels, okay? Single mothers, if you have a second child, you're not going to get money. And a lot of the stuff that's coming out is really punishes people very, very severely. So there have been department funnels, Department of Health, Department of Housing, Department of Labor, and I'm sure there's many, many, many more because it's the largest bureaucracy in the world. Instead of saying, make these departments, you know, interconnect on the issue of poverty. So because any one department can't do it. I don't think any one country can do it anymore, seeing how closely enmeshed we're becoming through globalization in terms of, you know, whose economy is here and whose economy is here and what's shifting and what's the dollar is worth. I think it's going to take a visionary leader in this country for the economy to improve and for people to really, really rise up. We can't wait 10, 15, 20, 30. We're not the French, you know? Or maybe we are. I shouldn't have said that. But they had their revolution, and we know how that revolution came about. We know how most of the revolutions in the world have happened. There's this many people who have nothing, and then this many people who have everything, and now maybe we have something to say. Whether they'll, you know, turn the guns on us, which is mostly what's happening to most protest movements around the world, but maybe at that time There'll be leadership that will sit down and say, it's not that we don't know how to fix it. It's just that we don't have the political will to do it, and haven't for a long time. And I saw potential. I saw actually a light. I saw potential in Janie. And slowly she, moved through the boss hierarchy of programs. And then came up to me one day and said, Boona, I know I shouldn't ask because it's not appropriate, but if you lend me $1,000, I'll promise you that I can start my own business and leave this behind. That 1,000 invested in an entrepreneur. Jenny now owns a home. Started to work for Boss about
12 years ago.
12 years. And we are launching our first venture on Monday the 10th.
Monday the 10th.
It's called Boona Presents. And you can find us on YouTube. We do an online show called Stories of Transformation. So if any of you have a story, call us. We will put you on YouTube. We've got to have optimism. We really do. Even at your age, you need to be optimistic, even though it's real fun, sort of like pretending to be that student who's a little narcissistic. So that's my challenge to you, is, well, there's all of us, all types here, is to really find yourselves really good placements, if you don't have any, or if you're going to look. What year students am I talking to? Everybody.
Third.
Everybody? Third, first, everybody. And then wherever you go, in your master's programs, in your PhD programs, and whatever, always look for places where you go in and remind people that they need to see the best of you. And they need to honor that. And they need to create a partnership with you so we can do the work together. And not, students showing up somewhere and you get to fold paper and we get to write policy. So that inequity also has to be, that gap also has to be closed. The gap between we, the intellectuals, you, the students, who will come here. No, it goes both ways. Otherwise, no real learning happens. So if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank you folks. I hope you have a great week. And it was really nice sitting in and listening to what you have to say. I'll look you up. Because I am that old lady who needs to be washing clothes and making money. Thank you so much.